Hi, I'm Ace, and I've decided to subject you to witnessing me talk about my D&D character. I decided to make Azrien's home in Minecraft. This is actually my second attempt of building the house, because the first time it was giving cottage in the woods, and Azrien does in fact not live in a cottage in the woods. They live in a very rundown shack in their town, which is called Slickwater Crossing. I'm showing you the original build because I spent about 80 minutes creating it and well over an hour and a half editing the original video. But by the end I was so unhappy with it because although the build itself isn't bad, it just wasn't the home in which I intended to give Azrien. So I started again. Azrien is a blue tiefling. Currently, he has just leveled up. He is level 3. But I'm using this as an excuse to talk about him because I have so much backstory written down for him and it deserves to be heard, okay? I'm now going to read you the backstory that I wrote for Azrien when I first created them as a character. I hope y'all are ready. Azrien, the non-gendered tiefling, grew up in darkness. His earliest memory was of being around 5 years old, sitting cross-legged in front of the fire. The crackling sounds echoed through their eardrums, and the soft, warm glow filled the room. Oh, how easy it is to be so blissfully unaware. The scene is battling with the soft glow of the fire and the threatening blast of an ungodly luminescence. Azrien's caregivers were in the drug trade. This is not uncommon for those who grew up in Slickwater Crossing. Azrien was exposed to harsh chemicals very early on and now has gained a resistance to most of the harmful poisons and chemicals in the world that he lives in, at least. By age 8, Vexhorne had learned to survive and adapt to the harsh, gloomy town which he had the unfortunate luck of growing up in. They became proficient in moving quietly, stealing small things without being seen, and observing people and their mannerisms. After becoming a seasoned thief, he almost became a borderline kleptomaniac. He simply cannot resist pickpocketing trinkets and knickknacks. It seemed a lot safer to keep these belongings rather than getting close to the people around him. At age 10, Azrien was a skilled thief and resistant to most run-of-the-mill drugs flowing through the county. A friend of their caregivers approached and took him on as an apprentice. In short, the friend used Azrien and his skills to perform drop-offs to unsafe locations. His small, agile stature worked perfectly. His dusty blue skin blends in with the unnatural cerulean hue that smothers Slickwater Crossing. The day following their 12th birthday, Azrien was met with a tragedy. Throughout the years, alongside the trinket collection, he then accumulated a horde of small pets. They ranged from the smallest green ant farm to some of the stray wolves that learned to be domesticated. Azrien is a lover of all animals. Even though he is young, they managed to keep themselves and his pets alive when the caregivers left for weeks on end. This particular day, he thought the caregivers had returned to their dingy home, but he was wildly wrong. Grunts and inhumane language filled the previously warm interior. Crashes and loud bangs echoed through the brick walls. Stealthily, they snuck towards the doorway and peered into the central room. Azrien was shocked, as he was aware of who the top bosses were, but he had never heard or seen them. Slickwater Crossing's drug trade was run by a notorious goblin family. As comfortable as Azrien is with the narcotic world, this was the first time he was at the tail end of the trade. 3 large goblins thrashed throughout the lodgings. They are searching for something unknown to Azrien. He watches as their frustration grows and they start to fling the rinky-dink enclosures across the room. Insects and other small pets such as mice and lizards scurry across the floor between their legs. For a moment, their success changed the purpose of their visit. Scanning the dismal stone floor, they decided to release and take all of the larger animals. Whimpering sounds of distress reverberated through Azrien's pointed ears. In fear, he cowered in his makeshift bed, in the darkness, until the sound of the wounded animals and smug goblins left the premises. Although his caregivers left him often, this was the one time he truly felt alone. Azrien remained lonely and curled up until daylight filled his room. In the light, Azrien could really see the extent of the goblins' damage. Their small tiefling body filled with a very just rage. The law is warped in his town. He knew there was nothing that they could do to fix this, and this awoke something dangerous in Azrien. He may not be that intelligent or strong, but he has the ability to deceive and intimidate even at the ripe age of 12. Azrien will not forget this. Now, if you remember from the picture, Azrien has a very lightly green snake around their waist, and this snake is called Boris. This section is called Meet Boris. Following the ransacking of Azrien's home, they decided it was time to take action. Amongst the rubble, Azrien located an unexpected and rare type of poisonous snake. The serpent was injured, with a laceration on the lower third of its body. It looked oddly like an axe wound. Regardless of Azrien's emotional turmoil, he felt as though they had a duty to take care of this animal. They carefully scooped the snake up and wrapped its tail in a torn piece of fabric. It was too tired to fight back. Azrien decided to take this snake with him and named it Boris. Just Azrien and Boris against the world. A year had passed, and Azrien, 13 years old and angry, decided he was not finished with his crime-encouraged ways. He returned home and integrated back into the running game, and slowly gained the trust of those above him. He advanced from simple drop-offs to being involved in the marketing strategies, to figuring out what the next big thing was. He discovered many things within the next few years, included learning that his closest companion is actually a female snake, and was shocked when she laid 6 eggs in his backpack. Starting adult life is the name of this section. Azrien became somewhat well known in the town he grew up in. The neighbouring towns and cities, calm and filled with diversity, even started to hear rumours of a tiefling involved in the goblin trade. At 19, Azrien was introduced to a stranger. The connecting contacts explained that this stranger had a new ingredient that would excel in the psychedelic and narcotic business. This unknown personality presented a glass-looking vial filled with an eerily dark, shimmery liquid. It has a green essence and pulsates accordingly. This is a new production. It doesn't seem remotely safe, but why would they care? They just want their money. Azrien has heard of the upcoming drugs, all their catchy names and unusual highs. This drug is called Cryptomyces lumiverde, with the street name known as gutter glowers. These unusual green spores can be harvested and ground down. G-glowers have an abnormal effect on the body, however they affect every single species differently. In most humanoids, once the drugs have actually entered the body, the veins throughout the taker's hand start to bubble and turn green. This only lasts an hour or so, but frequent users will continue to have green glowing veins and bloodshot eyes. Once the G-glowers has entered the body, the circulating blood slows. The usually red liquid becomes pulsating with the green essence. With one deep breath in, you feel as though you are glowing from within. The tingling sensation alone will be able to start wars, but the way your mind opens is abysmal. you become simultaneously more and less of the being you were before you dabbled in the spores. Azrien, being as immune as he is, has never felt this wonderful sensation. This is what makes them an excellent salesperson and dealer, because they can never get high off their own supply. Now, that was the entire backstory of which I wrote for Azrien prior to the campaign, when I was explaining my wonderful character to my DM. The majority of that was because I wanted Azrien to be poison resistant, but I also wanted them to almost have the poison spray as a weapon, which, being we play a homebrew campaign, the DM signed off on this and that was allowed. So Azrien is so immune to everything that's ever happened, and his body has so changed chemically in order to produce a poison spray that has had no effect on him as a person. And it's such a strange outcome, but it made a lot of sense when I was writing it, and for it to be signed off by the DM and allowed, I was like, yes, absolutely, can't wait. Like most rogue characters, yes, Azrien's a little bit edgy. He needed an edgy backstory. They now have an edgy backstory. They hate goblins. They have this ungodly rage against the world for what happened to these animals that he cared for as a young child, because he wasn't given attention by his caregivers. They left him on their own so frequently that they became friends with random dangerous animals, but there was this mutual understanding that Azrien would take care of them and they both get to live. It was a weird situation that a young child got themselves into, but shouldn't have even have been in that situation to begin with. From my descriptions of the home in which Azrien left, I kept it brief, but in my head I always saw it as a very much run-down shack. It was made of stone, but it was dirty. There were holes, there was ivy and plants growing through the walls. They had have one large room that was separated to house the three of them in this house. Like, in terms of the bedroom was split in two, but with very bad dividers. And this was a necessity because they were never home. It was just more or less Azrien's room, but he never felt as though the space was his. Azrien never felt that any of this space was his, other than the animals in which he cared for. He did hide them when his parents or caregivers came home, and they would stay in the greenhouse behind the building. But the greenhouse had the growth of the gutter glowers and other mushrooms that were common in the area. Azrien lived far away enough to the main street of Slickwater Crossing so that they could grow this in peace without being affected by local authority if they ever did arrive. But it's not very common. They didn't live in the woods like the original build suggested. They didn't live in a nice place. They lived in a rundown shack. And if I was able to have built multiple skyscrapers relatively close in this time, I would have, to show the sheer size of this shack, which is tiny. It's meant to be small and housed, again, the only three people that lived there, and even then, the three people barely lived there. After Azrien discovered that the caregivers had left and there was nothing coming back after the goblins raided, we actually never hear of the caregivers again. We don't know what happened to them. We assumed it was just a drug run that went wrong, but we never get any clarity on this. There is never any confirmation whether they just abandoned this small child that they were apparently caring for, or whether or not something happened to them in which they couldn't return. But the fact that they had the property raided while they were gone makes you assume and think that possibly they had done goblins dirty and then went on the run, but didn't take Azrien with them, which is so sad, as at the time Azrien was 12. He was 12 and abandoned by the two people that weren't his parents but looked after him enough to raise him. It was awful, to be honest. He's such anyway. But now that Azrien has been played in this campaign, he's adapting. To begin with, he was, again like most rogues, edgy and quiet and has this hatred against the world and doesn't grow bonds with people. And Azrien still is very much like that. But since joining this party and having these other adventurers with him in a very unlikely scenario, Azrien has started to adapt and start to feel emotion again, start to feel a little bit of disappointment if he was to leave them like he planned a couple of times. There was one scenario in which Azrien had the option to just run and leave the battle, leave the people and just escape. And he was toying with the idea, but they decided that they were going back on themselves and went to help their bard friend, because whether they like it or not, they are friends now, and the bard was in trouble, and of course our sneaky boy was able to go and very much stab the Achilles of this goblin. Azrien has become weirdly attached to two NPC children that are in the story, and although the outcome is not ideal for anybody involved in terms of what happens to these children, whilst they were still here, Azrien became very much paternal over them, especially the emo one who had lost his dad. They tried very hard to console them but had no idea what to do because they've never been shown kindness or empathy in that way. And that's the type of person Azrien is. Now, this was a very fun build. It was the second, as I mentioned, the second build for Azrien's home, but this one felt a lot closer to what I had imagined. And I think I'll do a walkthrough now and I will show you all the insides. I lit it up with some blue lanterns. There is blue glass ahead because I wanted to try and make the hue, but I couldn't be bothered to finish it. But the inside has been decorated with some lanterns and some not very nice looking paintings. You can see the bedrooms are only separated by very thin walls, but this was Azrien's home, and I hope you have enjoyed me ranting and telling you about my D&D character, because I have enjoyed telling you about him, and I'm sure I will tell you more in the future, or start telling you about my new character whose name is Kiki, and I may get into that at some point. Thank you for watching. Bye.